All right, welcome to the Creative Futures Podcast, Episode 1. My name is Damian Hoskins. I'm the Executive Director of Elements Cultural Arts Center, and we have as our first guest, Jordan Glickson. Jordan, how are you? Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Happy to see this coming to fruition. I know we've been talking about it for a while.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, by way of introduction, Jordan, tell us who you are and what you do.
Where do I start? So I guess in the spirit of what this podcast is, I'll say who I am right now, right? As a professional, I'm the vice president of music and talent at Vivo. So let me unpack that a little bit, I guess. First, with a question that even after 15 years, I still get a lot is what is Vivo? Vivo is a music distribution network. We're often found and related to being on YouTube, but we also have our own channels if you have a smart TV. And we help distribute and monetize and promote videos for artists and their labels. So we want to get as many people to see the music videos as possible, and we want the artists to be able to make as much money off of those as possible. So that's really what the company is. My role is heading up the global team that deals with the artists and labels and managers. So, how do we get the music videos to Vivo? Because not everyone puts their music videos through Vivo. How do we promote them when we get them? How do we talk to artists and their teams about why Vivo is the right place for them to put their music videos? We also shoot a lot of our own original content. So while my team doesn't produce that content, my team does decide the artists that we're putting in that content. So whenever you see Vivo performances or things like that, that's my team deciding who's going to do that, and then we work with our colleagues to produce that content. And I also oversee the team that runs all Vivo social media. So if you're following Vivo on Instagram or TikTok, which you should be, and if you're not, go do that right after this podcast. I'm not physically doing the posts, but again, I'm overseeing the team that does and helping with the strategy around that.
Yeah, that's dope. So I'm old. So what you just described in Vivo sort of reminds me of two iconic hip hop specific television broadcasts. One is Video Music Box with Ralph McDaniels
Yep.
and then Yo MTV Raps. But I'm assuming that Vivo is more expansive than hip hop culture solely. But when you talked about the supporting of artists, their teams, monetizing things, that sounds like it has its origins in one of those two platforms. Am I close?
It's definitely 100%. And then how has the world evolved? So, like I said, we're on YouTube, and everyone knows how YouTube works. You go and you search for what you want to watch, and or sometimes the algorithm surfaces something to you. So obviously that's part of what we do. But as I said, we have smart TV programming, and that's where the OMTV Raps, the video music box, really relates to what we're doing now, where we have channels. We actually have 16 of them in the US alone, not to mention Europe and Australia and Canada, um, where people on my team are programming those channels just like OMTV Raps and Video Music Box, where it's not about the algorithm. It's a human being saying, we have a hip hop channel, we have a pop channel, we have a R&B channel, we have a 70s channel, 80s channel, 90s channel, 2000s channel. And if you really want to feel old, because it makes me feel old, we even have a throwback 2010s channel. That's how
That,
far we are in the
that throwback?
that's how far we are into the 2020s now, that there's throwback 2010s channel. But and then my personal favorite channel that really connects to what you're saying is we have a channel we call True School Hip Hop.
Mhm.
So we obviously have a Vivo hip hop channel, and that's a lot of what you hear on the radio and is trending now, and may not be what I'm personally listening to, but it's all the big artists of today. But then we have this True School channel, which is where you and I would spend most of our time watching, which is not just throwback hip hop, but current hip hop that still carries that vibe. So
Yeah.
you're obviously going to see Public Enemy and Eric B and Rakim and all that, but then you're also going to see Rhapsody and all of these artists that are really spitting and sort of carrying the hip hop culture. And that's not to say anything negative about the ones that aren't. Everything evolves, every genre evolves. But for those of us that really are still stuck in the past a little bit, and still want to listen to the music we grew up with, but also the new artists that are really in that vein. That's that True School hip hop channel. And then I love that you brought up Video Music Box and Ralph, because he's actually I met him early in my career, um, which to me was like, Yo MTV Raps was probably what made me fall in love with hip hop, and sort of got me started. And then Ralph's just a legend on the other side. I mean, hearing, when I was a kid growing up and people would name drop him in songs, I was like, I didn't know who he was. I couldn't watch Video Music Box in Chicago, or even like his cameo in Juice and things like that. And then, early in my career, my boss introduced me to him, and we've kept in touch. And literally, uh, in February, we had Ralph in our studio. And so that's something where I think we're a little bit different than, or not even different, it's just the way the world's evolved. Is we're a music network, a music video network. He's got a music video show, but we don't view him as competition. Hopefully he doesn't view us as competition. We want to collaborate with artists like that and people like that. So we had Ralph come in and host an hour block on our True School Hip Hop channel, where he picked 10 videos and did introductions about them and why they were, some of them he directed, some of those classics. But again, like, to me, I've been in this business a long time at this point, but I still have these moments where I'm like, I'm emailing Ralph McDaniels and he is like, Jordan, good to hear from you. And I'm like, how did I get from this like 12-year-old kid in the suburbs of Chicago to Uncle Ralph McDaniels answering my emails in seconds?
That's that's gotta feel a very particular way, especially for somebody who loves the culture. And so you alluded to one of the questions that I really wanted to dig into. You actually alluded to two things, and I'll start with the latter. Um, and that is, you mentioned Rhapsody. A lot of times hip hop uh aficionados, hip hop heads, they'll have their top five MCs. But I very rarely hear people talk about their top five female MCs. And given this is like Women's History Month, for it, I wanted to shine some light and give some flowers, and wondered, have you thought about that? And if so, what is your top five list of iconic female MCs?
So before I dance around that question because it's so difficult, um, I'll say, a few years ago, a friend of mine who does a hip hop blog and newsletter, he reached out to a bunch of industry professionals at the end of the year. I think it might have been 2020 going into 2021 or something like that. And he asked for their predictions for the year to come. And my prediction was that, and this isn't to say anything negative about the question, but to speak to, what you're talking about. My prediction was people are going to stop separating female MCs and male MCs, because there are so many dope female MCs now, and it's not like, again, when we were younger and there were just like two at a time, and so everyone pitted them against each other. Um, and I think we're starting, it's natural, just like people are going to talk about white MCs or Latin MCs. Like, there's always going to be those subset, debates, right? So no matter how big or how many successful female MCs there are, you know, if anything, maybe they get so big that male MCs become the minority. And then we're sitting here in 10 years going, who are your top five male MCs?
Right,
Um,
right.
so that's all to say that, like, I love how far female MCs have come. Um, so top five, I mean, Rhapsody is definitely in there. And I'm 100%. I don't even want to say I'm biased, because Rhapsody and I have a friendship, and I can dive into that a bit too if we want. But the friendship started because of mutual admiration. So it wasn't we were friends and then I found out she rapped and now I'm biased. We got to know each other because I thought she was so dope and I wanted to use any platforms I had to help elevate her. And we built our friendship based on that. Um, Lauren's got to be in there. I mean, I know, and with her nominated for hip hop or for Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I know there's a lot of debate about longevity and how much content she's created or not, because she had two albums with the Fugees, and then even Miseducation was half hip hop, half R&B, half soul. It was obviously this amalgamation of so many different things, but like you go back and you listen to the score and just the bars that she like, it's ridiculous. Um, so I don't know how Lauren can't be in there. Um, MC Light, I love Light, and I love that in a business where unfortunately particularly women but artists in general as they get older it's harder for them to find recognition and work. I love every time I listen to an award show and she's doing the voiceovers,
Yeah,
um and that she's been able to make that pivot.
yeah.
Um I don't know how you don't put Latifah in there. Like I think she's got to be, even just purely as an MC, but also as a trendsetter.
Oh,
I know people talk about Ice-T and Ice Cube and Will Smith, but like she was one of the first that made the pivot to acting,
totally, totally.
and she doesn't get the recognition for it.
Promise. I totally agree. Dude. I totally agree.
Um, and again, she had her cameo in Juice, as the promoter of the DJ battle and stuff like that. But like, um, and then, and I mean, it's so tough. Like, there's so many current dope MCs. There's some that Jean Grey
Oh,
is absolutely amazing.
slept on.
Uh,
So slept.
uh,
Big Prayer, so slept.
yeah. Um, Eternia. I don't know if you're hip to Eternia.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, uh, and I know I'm like sleeping on so many like Chez Noir. Um, Obviously I haven't even mentioned Salt and Pepper. You
Hmm.
know, any of the Roxannes, like
Right, right, right.
and that's what I love about these debates. And as someone that is a ride or die Michael Jordan fanatic that will carry the torch of him being the GOAT forever, you will never probably be able to convince me otherwise. I think same like you just can't compare these different eras.
It's,
Like
it's yeah,
everything's an evolution of what existed before. And hip hop when it started wasn't about these complex bars. It was more the toasting and right. And so to compare someone that's doing triple entendres now, to someone that was more about the live environment
right,
than the recorded environment, um, it's hard to it's not apples to apples. And
right.
so that's why it's like my top five is always going to be sort of a couple from here and a couple from here and a couple from here.
Yeah.
um and also what mood you're in. And that's the thing I love about hip hop too is sometimes I do want to just hear someone spit bars that I'm like, oh my god. And sometimes I want to party,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I want someone that's just gonna like rap out having a good time and
Yeah.
um and that stuff. So
Yeah.
but
No,
I think
that's
yeah.
I think that's dope, man. I teach this course at the University of Cincinnati on hip hop studies, and we recently had this conversation, given that it's Women's History Month, around MCs, female MCs, and we had the exact same conversation. First, starting off with the reality that making that distinction between male and female MCs, that it taints the conversation because really, if you took lyrics without names, female MCs are writing Pulitzer Prize winning stuff, like
For sure.
hands down, and have been for years. And so, my conversation or my top five actually starts with Latifah. And it's only because when I was a junior in high school, All Hail the Queen came out, and she had a song on there with Daddio from Stetsasonic called The Pros. And my favorite class was my English class with Mrs. Yanka. She was my English teacher. And Latifah had this line in there, and then where she was battling this MC, and she goes, "Before he attempted to make a sound, I ate him up with a verb, broke him down with a noun." And I was like, I'm walking to the cafeteria after Mrs. Younger's class, and my mind,
Right.
you're right. It's not particularly, complicated or anything like that, but it was just the fact that she was being incredibly strategic and also intentional about her word choice. And that to me was just like, okay, yeah, I'm in love with Latifah. And then, you got to go MC Light. I had, Light as a Rock, Paper Thin. The thing for me for Light was when she busts on with her verse on Self-Destruction. She just pops up,
Yep.
funky fresh dress to impress, ready. Like that to me was like, okay, yeah, Light. I love Light. And then like I gotta go L Boogie, Lauryn Hill. I had a crush on Lauryn Hill. That's probably why. Like,
I don't know. I don't know if you could have been a hip hop fan at that time
yeah,
and not.
and not have a crush.
Like, I mean, she and look, and I know we're talking and this is the whole point about talking about female MCs is it shouldn't be about looks or gender or anything like that. But she had the looks
That,
combined with and not in a
that's the
sexualized
point.
way
Yeah,
either.
that's the point. Like it was,
She was the girl you went to school with, but
yes,
she was a dope
yeah.
MC.
And when she did, the Fugees, the first album, she was Tim's, baggy clothes, and you
Yeah,
only heard her lyrics. And it was like, and then you saw her face, and it was like, man, she's gorgeous and she's talented and she's brilliant and she's dope and she's all these different things. And so I absolutely had a crush on her. My I guess my third pick is somewhat of a dark horse, and very few people talk about her, but you would respect this. It's Bahamadia. Bahamadia.
yeah,
I was in college, dude. Bahamadia came out, and the Philly voice was just, I mean, it was so it goes to the point that you made earlier. Like sometimes you want to hear, dope rhymes, sometimes you want to party. There was something about Bahamadia, because I'm a visual artist as well, that when you throw her voice on and it's playing in your headphones, like you can create.
yeah.
Her voice almost was like a soundtrack to the art that I was trying to create, and she was absolutely dope. My fifth would be someone new, and I don't know if you've heard of Chica.
Yeah,
Okay, she to me she's carrying the mantle from the Bahamadias and the El Boogies, and she is and the Latifahs, and her lyricism is so dope. I caught her on a tiny desk a couple of years ago. I think it was probably during COVID, and she just totally rocked it. And,
yeah,
and these are artists for me who are, they if you take their lyrics and separate it from their gender, it's incredibly dope writing, and they don't have there's no gimmick around it. There's no
right,
gimmick around it. And that's to me is like that really what sort of separates a true MC. And again, it doesn't have to be necessarily the most complicated lyrics or the most, in depth or anything like that. And most of these are those kinds of lyricists.
right.
But it's the fact that they love the culture, and every time they put something out, it seems to be a refinement on what they had done previously. You know what I mean?
100%.
Yeah. So I mean I love that answer, man. I love that introspection from you, particularly as an industry, professional. And so, but you didn't come out of high school and just jump into, Vivo. So talk a little bit about like your journey. Like first off, this is the old brown sugar question. Like when did you fall in
Right.
hip hop? Like
So it one of the things that's funny to me is other people seem to have realized I loved hip hop before I realized I loved hip hop.
interesting.
Like I knew I liked it, but I thought it was just that was just the music I liked. Like you talked about, junior high school, or being a junior in high school with your English class. I remember being in sixth grade. So I was 11 or 12. And I grew up in a predominantly white area, and it was Black History Month, and everyone had to pick a Black History Month topic. And my teacher assigned me hip hop
Hmm.
because she knew I liked it. And at that point, I hadn't sort of realized that this was any different than I was just, and obviously, given my age, I was like, MC Hammer and Jazzy Dress and Jeff from Fresh Prince and all that was out, but like I was listening to Digital Underground and Public Enemy and some other, but I didn't realize that that was unusual.
Hmm.
It was just what I started to like. And interestingly, I went to every summer I would go to a sports summer camp. Um, and one of the counselors who, again, so I was 11 or 12, he was probably 17, 18. Um, loved hip hop. And again, sort of I realized like, hey, here's this younger kid who's sort of into it. And he sort of spent the summer educate. That was like the first time I heard like Compton's Most Wanted and Poor Righteous Teachers and like the things that you didn't easily find. This wasn't the social media days. You had to find this stuff. Um, and it was after that summer. So I was, like 11, 12 years old, where I was like, this is like the wrestling posters started coming down off my wall, and the Public Enemy and Ice Cube posters started going up. And, um, and, any, hey, it's your birthday. Here's some money. Cool. Mom, take me to Best Buy. I want to get a bunch of hip hop CDs. And, you know, um, I mean, my bar mitzvah when I was 13, the theme was hip hop.
No kidding.
Like, so I don't know how many people are familiar with, traditional bar mitzvahs or whatever, but they're Jewish kids when they're 13 have this tend to have this big party and they're always themed. Especially growing up in Chicago in the 90s, lots of basketball theme and stuff like that. Um, which again, named Jordan growing up in Chicago in the 90s, like very easily could have been Air Jordan, theme, all that. But I chose hip hop and um, my tables that all my friends and I sat at were all named after hip hop groups. So like Public Enemy was the table that me and my best friend sat at. Um, I got my first set of turntables as my bar mitzvah gift. Like, so it was, 11, 12, 13 years old. This was early 90s. But it was sort of just that thing of like, I didn't realize I was into anything unusual, but then other people saw it and sort of kept feeding that. Again, that having a teacher that was like, you're going to give like a 10-minute presentation to the class on hip hop. And I was like, and I actually remember I wanted to play so much music as part of the presentation that my presentation, well, the first time I ran it through was like 24 minutes or something. Cause I like everything I wanted to talk about. I was like, and let me play you a clip of that. And I was sitting there with my boombox and my, play the CD, record onto a cassette. Um, and I'll always say, I've said this many times. I reflected on this a lot around hip hop's 50th anniversary, which, if you want to talk about karma or destiny, hip hop's 50th birthday, August 11th, 1973, the same day my parents got married.
Nice.
Um, so I remember the first time I learned that, I was like, you're like, are you kidding?
It was,
Like, are you kidding? Like, Cool Herc's in New York
yeah.
create birthing hip hop or however you want to phrase it, and my parents are in Chicago getting married like literally at the same time. So around the 50th I did a lot of reflecting on this, and again, white suburban kid growing up, Tupac posters on my door, things like that. Very easily my parents can be like, like sports, whatever, like you're going to go to college and become a lawyer and all these stereotypical things. They leaned in. They encouraged the passion. Um, I remember I was never told I couldn't listen to music with explicit lyrics as long as I didn't start talking like that. That was always sort of I could listen to NWA in my bedroom, never was told to turn it off. Just, we better not hear you talking like that. So I give so much credit to my parents that they were like, if this is a passion, like as long as you're still doing good in school and all that. But when it came time to start looking at colleges, I DJ'd for a party company in high school. Like everything I did was about feeding, this love of music, and they 100% never tried to step in my way and always encouraged it. Um, so parents, teachers, always seemed to lean into this love that I was starting to show and help me, nurture it.
Yeah. Shout out to mom and dad for doing that. That's incredible, man. So it just reminds me, man, like the first album that I ever got for a birthday present, I was 10 years old, and Run DMC's Raising Hell dropped. And my mother called me. She worked the third shift at a pharmacy. She called me. She said, "What do you want for your birthday?" I said, "I want a record." She says, "Well, what's the name of it?" I said, "I can't say it because there's a curse word." Just spell it. And so I spelled
Yeah.
Raising Hell, and she goes, "What is this?" I said, "This it's Run DMC, mom." And I had a friend who lived down the street from me. This was in Atlanta. I was living in Atlanta at the time. And a friend who lived down the street from me, his name was Aswad, and he was from Brooklyn. And his family had come to New York, and him and his sister were all hip hop, all hip hop. And so that's
Yeah.
where I was like, what is this really? And when she bought that album and I put that thing on, and this is the one that has my Adidas and Walk This Way
Right.
and Peter Piper. And it was like, I fell head over heels in love with the back and forth cadence and the trading of rhymes of Run and D. And then Jam Master Jay just really setting this musical rich background, this sonic background that was just so intense. And I was like, this is exactly the path that at the very least will be the soundtrack of my life. And I'm older than you, so I was actually born like 4 months after hip hop was born. I was born in 1973,
Yeah.
and that led me to having again like this understanding of this culture that was burgeoning and developing and bubbling up, and then becomes this global phenomenon. But I do have sort of more of a transitional question because you had mentioned in your work, um, sort of like the new how the true school, which I think is a very, very
Right.
appropriate word. Mad Skills when he got his Grammy,
Yeah.
somebody asked him a question about old school and new school. He called the best hip hop middle school. And I was like, okay, that's cool. I'm feeling it.
Right.
But I have this. I love the culture. What I saw in the 90s, in late 90s, early 2000s, is this bifurcation between the culture, the richness of the culture, and everything that made it the culture, and the commercial aspect
Right.
of rap music, right? Which divorces many times the culture and the commerce. And so
Right.
I have a love-hate relationship with the stuff that I hear on the radio. And I also think that there's some social engineering going on. We went from an era, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this. We went from an era where all of our hip hop artists had aspirational, grandiose, larger than life names to an era where
Right.
everybody was little something. Little Uzi Vert, Little Dirk, but
Right.
we were Heavy D, the Notorious B.I.G., Big Daddy
Right.
Kane, Queen, like you know what I mean. We were all of
Right.
these sort of, and it gave kids who were looking at these artists a way of seeing themselves larger than life and aspiring for something else. But then this commercialization happened, and I understand the business side, but I would love to hear your perspective from the business side, and then also if you believe that there is this disconnect with the commerce and the culture.
I mean, it's so tough. I think we live in an interesting world now that arguably is better, where everyone has access to, if you have Spotify, Apple, Vivo, YouTube, you have access to all of it, right? And that didn't used to happen. The era you're talking about, 90s, whatever was on the radio was what became popular. That was sort of the only way. I mean, sure, something could be in the source or, get played late on UMTV raps. And there's the mixtape era that, had some stuff bubbling on the underground, which wasn't really called the underground at that point, right? Because to your point, in the early 90s, what was played on hip hop radio, it was all the same,
So
right? The Public Enemy, EPMD, all that stuff was going gold and platinum. And I think we are so precious, myself included, about hip hop. We feel that it's us, right? We're not fans of this music. We are members of this culture.
a great point.
And so we have a hard time, and I keep saying we on purpose because I understand the business side because that's what I do every day, but I also understand how like personal
Yeah.
I take everything related to hip hop when I hear people debating about which hip hop artist should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and should there be a hip hop Hall of Fame and all these things. But I think what's happened with hip hop isn't actually that unique to hip hop. I think it happens with clothing styles. I think it happens with rock music. I will guarantee you that there are people in Nashville that feel this way about country music that are like what is getting played on the radio and is considered popular country now, which actually blends some hip hop in and stuff like.
Uh,
There are probably, purists in the country music world that are going like that's not country music.
right.
I actually like some of that, some of this newer, and maybe because it's got that hip hop influence, right? And so I think anything that people feel possessive and passionate about, we don't like to see change. I'm a sneakerhead, and I know there's sneakerheads that actually don't like when they see too many people wearing Jordan 3s and or Jordan 1s or dunks or whatever, because they're like, it's my community. And it used to be a way that, oh, you like hip hop, I like hip hop, I know we have a connection. I don't need to know anything else about you. But now you hear like, oh, I like hip hop too. And now it's like, oh, well, what kind of hip hop or what artists? And you could both be hip hop fans, but be all the way over here. And I think that's okay. Uh, and I just think things get commercialized, things that become successful and start grassroots and have a groundswell and build, they eventually become commercialized. And I think, I don't want to say it's okay. It's just the way the world works. And then you just have to hold on to what you like. And that's why I say I think we live in this really cool era where, yes, maybe radio isn't playing what we want to hear, or maybe when you see the charts of most watched hip hop music videos, it's not, you know, what we think should be there, but no one's stopping us
Yeah,
from getting to it.
yeah.
And there's a podcast I love called Take It Personal. If you haven't listened to it, you should. But they're the main guy is this guy from Philly. He goes by the name Phila Flava. He was big in the blog era, and they're very much about true school hip hop. They just did an episode, their most recent one. It's all music that samples Method Man as the hook.
Mhm.
Like that's like they did like a 3-part episode on what made 1994 great, and it was 6 hours long. Like, so they play the music, they have these great mixes that are very feel like mixtape era, but then they debate in between and they talk. But a couple times a year they will do an episode purely devoted to new music that people that listen to their podcast would like but don't know is coming out because we're all too stubborn to
Yeah,
go listen to the new stuff. So a couple times a year, they do a purely new music episode and they're like, we understand most of the people listening to our podcast just want to listen to what they've listened to for 30 years, which is fine. We're going to spend 2 hours playing music for you that you probably didn't even know was coming out,
yeah,
that you're gonna, oh shit, who's
yeah,
that artist? That I didn't know about that artist. You mentioned Chica, we mentioned Chez Noir, and all these artists that come out. Um, and you get to a certain age where maybe you're not looking for the new stuff, so you need someone to tell you
yeah,
about it. And so that's one of the things I love about that, and it's one of the things I love about what I do as a fan and as an industry professional is I love people telling me what am I missing out on, and then I love that I have a platform to help share that. And again, it goes back to what I was saying about how my relationship with Rhapsody started was me seeing that I have a platform to like, this artist is dope. How can I make more people aware?
yeah, yeah. And I think that's true. Everything that you've just said sort of resonates with me. I am stubborn when it comes to this. I'm not particularly looking for, the new stuff, only because of how you described the delivery of these new, the new music. There was a point in time when we were the algorithm. You know what I mean?
Right.
We were the ones who decided what was the thing that was hot and whether or not that was going to be on repeat and then there was a symbiotic relationship too with the artist, like because they would get mixtapes out in easily accessible spaces, and if we played it and we loved it, then it was just more of it. So that got replaced by sort of this computer algorithm that was basically just designed to sell stuff. Totally different experience. But I also understand like the importance of the commercial side of things. But at the end of the day, I'm one of those guys who loves the the dopeness of a piece of art. You know what I mean?
Right.
So whether it comes in this era or the previous era, I will spend a ton of time listening to Common. But I also love the fact that J. Cole references Common in
Yep.
the new album. You know what I mean? I love my favorite song on the J. Cole album is called Life Sentence. and it's a love song to his wife that samples DMX. And I'm like,
Right.
he's paying homage to history, to the foundation, and then keeping it in this era, right? And
Right.
and also Cole is one of those guys who he understands and appreciates the past so much that he is doing the Master P thing, selling it out of the trunk, like going around the country selling
Right.
the trunk. And there's something about that visceral aspect of it that I think the newer generation or the younger generation, as they see that as him as a representative, not some old guy who's saying back in my day.
Right.
No, but they see Cole saying, no, this is
Right.
really the foundation on with the shoulders that I'm standing on. He becomes a bridge to the sort of those past artists and stuff like that, because there's a lot of people who are listening to Cole who didn't listen to DMX or doesn't know that he's
Right.
referencing Common in one of his songs, right, and all that sort of stuff. I think that we need more of that artist. And I know that it's a lot of, when I, as an old guy, it comes off like this is a controversial take. And I don't particularly care about that. It's fine. It can be, I'm not really the biggest fan of people who don't create bodies of work, that they create things to be popular in the moment. And as an industry professional, you have to look at both sides of that. And I'm curious,
Right.
if you can dig a little bit deeper about how you balance that.
Yeah, we actually spend a lot of time trying to educate artists on not just how you make a hit right now, but how you use the algorithm and things like that to actually have sustained success. And a lot of it's what you're talking about, which is, you know, the way we consumed music was different. And again, you can debate good, bad. You know, for us, you saw a video on UMTV Rap. I'll give an example of myself. First time I saw Wu Tang on UMTV Raps, that was when I got introduced. I had my mom take me to Best Buy, and I bought the album off one song and the Method Man video. And then they were on the show that night, and I was like, "This is the craziest thing I've ever seen." But I had no idea if I was going to like the rest of the album, so I had to fork out the $15. Now, I don't have any issue with people that say like, "Right, that was a broken model because you may have just paid $15 for an entire album based off one song. And what if you hated everything else? So now I don't have to do that. Now I get to hear everything. And if I like, sorry, I thought I lost you for a second. So I definitely see that side of like, that was a broken model.
Yeah.
The industry was ripping us off one good song and I hated everything else and I paid $15. Now, you know, the artist will get paid each time I listen. So maybe they get paid less, but they've got to make something I want to keep listening to. Um, and so I think the way people create is different. And so you do have the J. Cole's or Common and Pete Rock, or we can go on and even in the pop world, you have certain artists that are like, I'm making an album,
Yeah.
right? This is an album. You have, Adele, who was one of the first ones, 5 or 10 years ago, that was saying to Spotify, like, I want my album by default to play in order. Don't default my album to play on shuffle because I built it a certain way, right? But then there's also playlists,
Yeah.
right? And so we tell artists a lot and their teams, if you're having a moment because you have, TikTok or Instagram or wherever, you may get sort of a buzz going, a million artists a day are putting out music and getting that little bit of buzz. So if you don't create a body of work or at least multiple songs that someone likes, you're not going to have longevity.
Right.
And it's hard, people can make music in their bedroom easier than ever before. So you could be 15, 16, 17 years old, all of a sudden having some go viral and being like, I'm going to be the biggest thing in the world, and not really 15, 16, 17. I wasn't thinking 5 years down the road. Like, so how can we expect, these kids to? And so that's a lot of what we try to do professionally. When I talk about like part of one of the teams that's under me, our job is artist relations, right? And that's a part we take very serious. We want artists to come into the office and we sit down with them. They play us music, we talk strategy, we give advice. I think that's what labels and managers need to be doing too. Is you know I listen to playlists just like everyone else does. I don't only listen to albums, but the first thing I do if I'm listening to a playlist that has a bunch of music I haven't heard, and then I hear a song I like, there's two things I do. One, if I like it enough, I save it to my own playlist. That's sort of my like, this is everything I like playlist. Um, but then I go and look and see what else they have.
Yeah,
And if they have nothing else, if it's only that song, I'm now a fan of a song, not an artist.
exactly.
And by the time they put out another song, who knows how many other artists I've been exposed to between now and then. Now, if I like that one song and I go and they have an album or even an EP, let's not even say an album, let's say an EP, 5 songs, and I go listen and I like 4 of the 5 songs, now I'm a fan of the artist. Now I'm following them on Instagram because I want to know the next time they put music out. I'm following them on Spotify so I get notified. I'm going to Vivo and YouTube to see if they have a music video. And this is where sometimes my personal and professional life collide is, especially emerging hip hop artists. I go, I look, I see if they're on Vivo or if they have videos that aren't. And then a lot of times I find myself DMing them on Instagram,
Mm.
or if they have like a manager contact or something, and I'm introducing myself and saying, and again, this goes back way further, but this is how Rhapsody and I connected was, you know, Two Dope Boys website put up one of her tracks. Or maybe it might have even been a whole mixtape. And the reason I paid attention was because of her Ninth Wonder connection. And I was like, well, Ninth Wonder co-signs her, then I got to check it out. Which is also how I became a huge fan of Sky Zoo.
Oh,
Was a Ninth Wonder collab. Was on Apple Music. Came across like never heard of Sky Zoo, but Ninth Wonder did a whole album with this guy. Like
yeah.
he deserves my attention. Sky Zoo is one of my favorite MCs.
Oh,
Like he drops something, I'm listening to it right away. Um, but so if someone's not working with Vivo, I'll DM them and I'll say like, here's what I do, and I'm a fan, and I want to talk about how you working with Vivo can benefit you. And so again, I always talk about the big pop artists, and by pop I'm actually meaning like popular. So like whether you're talking the Drakes and the Kendricks, or you're talking Billie Eilish and Olivia Rodrigo or whatever genre, like 100% understand that's who keeps the lights on at Vivo, right? That's what's driving whatever amount of, I'm not going to misquote a number, whatever percentage of our views, although nostalgia drives a lot of views too. But my team and I don't want to just speak for me, like we're all music fans. We all have different tastes, but we're all music fans. And we all take very seriously our not just role and responsibility, but our opportunity to give a platform to artists we love, whatever genre that may be. And my team's got people that love every genre, every era. It's what makes our team so great. Is we don't have someone that loves hip hop programming country music.
yeah.
Doesn't make right. We've got people that love the genres and know about them, handling those things. But we all love, like that's a huge thing for us, is that we know the platform we have and the opportunity we have to say like, this is an artist I love, and now I'm not just a fan sharing it with my friends. I can actually give this artist a platform and hopefully build their fan base.
Yeah. Now this is huge, man. This is huge. This is so big. I truly appreciate that. Let me ask you one final question. And the podcast that we are developing here, Creative Futures, our work is essentially designed to help develop the next generation of creative problem solvers. Some of those individuals will be performers, some of them will be entertainers, some of them will be entertainment lawyers, some of them will be lighting engineers. It's the entire creative economy that we
Right.
tries to support, sort of similar to what you're saying at Vivo. It's not just hip hop. We do, our catalyst is hip hop culture because it's the most easily accessible American art form, and particularly a lot of the young people that we serve gravitates towards hip hop culture really, really seamlessly. But when we're thinking about inspiring them for the future, a part of that inspiration is information. So my question to you, as someone who has created a career pathway for yourself through the entertainment industry, loving hip hop culture, never feeling like you had to abandon hip hop culture for
Yeah,
what a lot of our kids hear, like get a real job or do something practical. You know what I mean? Like
right.
there is something real about what you do. Let me ask you this. What advice would you give to your 12-year-old self that you think would also be something that would resonate with a young person in 2026?
I think what I did is the advice I give, which is dive in, lean into the passion, but continue to educate yourself. Don't rely on it, a typical career pathway, because you don't get a job in the music business because you went the right college and got straight A's. There are people that work with me, for me, above me, below me, whatever, that have gone to community college, that have gone to Ivy League schools, that have majored in music or majored in economics or marketing or history or political. It's an industry that there are more and more opportunities. You mentioned the class you teach and things like that, but I was buying books at the bookstore, whether they were biographies or autobiographies or just like, I still have them at my parents' house. So I found some of them, just books about the music industry. There's one that's been around forever by a guy named Donald Passman, and they update it every few years. Anyone that has a dream of working in music in any aspect should have that book. I would actually argue, as I'm looking at your bookcase behind you, that like Elements should maybe have a few copies of it,
Yeah,
like in sort of an Elements library that kids can loan out and
it's very
bring back or something like that. Um, and and just immerse yourself in anything that's even tangentially related. Like I DJ'd for a company that did bar mitzvahs and graduation. I wasn't playing hip hop music, but I was learning what resonated with the crowd. I was learning how the person that ran the company marketed the company. It was all these different things. I worked at Best Buy because I wanted to see what music was coming out each week and things like I worked in the stereo department so I could hear what was on the radio all the time. I basically wrote my paychecks back over to Best Buy, in CDs. Um, like a lot of the kids that are going to Elements, this isn't the side of the business I thought I was going to be on. I went to college thinking I wanted to be like Premier or Pete Rock and like live in a studio all day long and making beats and probably like a lot of the hip hop fans. I don't know if I've ever said this publicly before. Like I wrote rhymes when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. Like probably even 16, 17 years old, thinking I was going to be a rapper. No one's ever going to hear those rhymes. That mixtape is not that mixtape's not coming out anytime soon. Uh, but whatever it is that got you passionate about this, find out what else it is. Like, so for me, the passion and what I realized was even my passion about DJing, my passion about DJing wasn't being the best mixer or scratcher or anything like that. I didn't, sure, I would have loved to have been able to be in a DJ battle like the DMC, but just wasn't my skill set. What I realized I loved about DJing and music in general was I loved being the one to tell people about new music. I even in junior high and high school, I was the guy people were coming to that were like, "What's this new thing?" Or I have friends that still tell me they remember, me walking through the hallways with my Discman, and they asked what I was listening to, and the first time they heard, "All Eyes on Me" or something, was when I let them use my headphones. Or we were talking about the Fugees before. I have a friend, from high school that's like, I will always hear the Fugees and think about driving around in your car during spring break because that's so that's what I loved. So I think it's what do you love? What is it about your love? You got to dig into it, not just wanting to be rich and famous and in front of everyone. And if you love hip hop or you love to write, maybe being a journalist or a publicist is the side you want to be on. Visual artist, maybe you want to be a photographer, design out, posters or merch or things like that. And to me, it's this is a very long-winded answer, but it's something I'm really passionate about. It's explore all the different areas. I think that's, if I have to sum it up, right? Explore all the different areas. You think this is the one part you want to do, don't write off the other ones. Try them out. You don't know what your passion's going to be or where your talents are going to lead. And so try them all out. You're going to find things you don't like, and you're going to go, no, that's not it. But you're going to find things you do and that are going to connect you with your skill set, and that's where you're going to be able to lean in and shine. And then I think the last thing that I would give as advice is maybe I'd frame it as don't be shy. If you're at Elements, if you're at a concert, which could be a small venue or something like that, you're at a record store, whatever it is, if you think there's someone there that can help, you can connect with and help move them forward and yourself forward, don't be bashful. Introduce yourself. You know, some people are going to brush you off, some people aren't. Some of my best connections are from doing exactly. I moved when I went to college at UC. When I got there, I didn't know anybody, but I went to hip hop show. I met one person by one person. I worked at Guitar Center, and a guy came in, and I heard someone say his name, and I was like, I've heard it. This guy G Fresh, who is a legend in Cincinnati hip hop. I never met him. He didn't know who I was, but he came in to buy something, and when I heard his name, I was like, I'm going to go tell him, what I do.
Yeah.
Um, and you know, you have to not be afraid to try things, and whether that means introducing yourself or stepping into a room where you might be uncomfortable. One of my biggest career stepping stones was working for UC's college radio station, Bearcast, which launched while I was there. I went into that first meeting as like a freshman or sophomore, and I completely acquiesced to all the juniors and seniors. And I was like, I'm just going to sit in the back and listen. And then after a couple months, I was like, no, I'm going to start diving in. And I became like the first music director. And I, obviously, I on the board of Elements with Dr. Owens, who started that and arguably changed my life, or it was at least one of several people that had a hand in changing my life because of Bearcast. And I had no radio experience. I just said, this is something I'm passionate about. I'm going to show up and I'm going to get involved any way I can. And so that, don't wait for someone else to do these things for you. Do your research, do your networking, put yourself in the environment. I think that's another one. Um, Things aren't just going to come to you. And I know we live in a very virtual world where it feels like things can happen on social media or email or things. Put yourself in the real world environment, where things can happen. Put yourself in the room, where things happen, as they say in Hamilton, right? Like just and make introductions. Some people are going to blow you off. It's batting averages. It only takes one to change your life.
Only takes one. Yeah. Yeah. It's what Steve Stout, the icon, the commissioner Steve Stout says, making a bet on yourself, placing a bet.
Yes.
So yeah. So listen, Jordan, this is a great conversation, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us at the Creative Futures podcast. It's been incredible. It's been dope. Great conversation. Thanks, Jordan Glickson, for joining us. And we will talk again soon, man.
Yeah, no, thank you. Honored to be the first guest. Looking forward to the future episodes coming with some industry icons dropping gems.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. I'm just gonna stop talking and I'm gonna stop
Yeah, I
recording.
was gonna say we could